A local school district is addressing a controversy involving one of its bus drivers. The superintendent says a parent contacted him about a Christian radio station being played on one of the buses.
Siloam Springs School District buses transport thousands of kids every day. Many of the drivers play music on the radio. But one family says a driver played a local Christian radio station.
We were notified last Monday, September 26th, by a patron about playing Christian music on the radio.
Superintendent Ken Ramey says he first found out about the issue last week, and it has since been taken care of. He says a delay in communication likely led to the Freedom from Religion Foundation sending this letter to the district.
We understand that the students on the bus are in a, they're in a contained situation, and under the Establishment Clause, we're supposed to be religious neutral, and so we see this as a verifiable incident that can be corrected.
Ramey says no harm was met by playing the Christian radio station on a school bus, and that the school bus driver shortage has the district working to bring all new hires up to speed.
We'll just simply be educating our people about and bring it to the conscious level. Just really good people who have no attempt to promote religion. That's just who they are.
In a school district whose motto is to accept all students unconditionally, some argue Gretna Public Schools is falling short.
We are a legitimate club just like everybody else. We just aren't getting the same rights as other clubs.
Junior Bridget Christensen is one of the leaders of Dragons for Life, a student pro-life club started last school year. She says her club is one of two the district won't formally approve. The other is a Christian club. Without approval, they can't meet during school hours like other clubs can.
Which is a big deal because many members cannot attend our own meetings.
The Thomas More Society law firm also thinks it's a big deal, backing the Gretna Junior with a demand letter to the school, sent Monday morning. In it, the firm says the administration should reverse its decision because it, quote, constitutes a violation of Bridget's rights under both the Federal Equal Access Act and the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. I talked to Gretna's superintendent and legal counsel who say the district's policy is that it cannot sponsor clubs that can be seen as political, religious, or commercial.
They need to maintain viewpoint neutrality, and that's basically what the law requires.
Members of the American Civil Liberties Union say that still doesn't trump First Amendment rights.
And they can't discriminate on the basis of religion or philosophy or other subject matter related issues. It's really about equal access and equal opportunity.
Students for Life of America is also supporting Bridget and her club. Representatives say typically once the demand letter is sent, the school backs down. The district's legal counsel say the issue is under review, and according to the demand letter, they have until the 14th to respond until further action is taken.
Time now to take a look at the craziness at our nation's schools and universities. And a new study of faculty voter registration at America's top universities found that Democratic professors outnumber Republicans by nearly 12-1. The study, published in the journal Econ Watch, also shows that our universities have become much more democratic since 2004. In some university departments, the ratio is especially stark. Journalism departments have 20 Democrats for each Republican professor. In history departments, there are more than 33 Democrats for every one Republican. Of the 40 schools covered by the study, Brown University was the most liberal, with 60 Democrats for every one Republican. Pepperdine University in California was the most conservative, with a roughly even ratio.
The IRS battle with Tea Party groups is starting all over again. The tax agency just sent them new scrutinizing questions and publicized some of their tax return data. The IRS targeted Tea Party groups in 2013, and the Washington Times reports they're getting the same kind of treatment once again. Now, an attorney for the Texas Patriots Tea Party says the IRS has exposed secret taxpayer return information to the public. Reports indicate more than 400 groups have been targeted by the IRS. Former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich is encouraging pastors to step away from the pulpit and run for political office. He says America is in the middle of a cultural war against Christianity, and it's time for Christians to have a say.
You have a duty to have the courage to stand up and tell the truth. Tell the truth about those who would impose a totalitarian secularism on us, force us to bow to the power of the government in order to do things that our religion forbids.
Gingrich is confident America will change if enough godly leaders decide to stand up.
Barack Obama has already cast his vote in the U.S. presidential election, which doesn't take place until November. He used a visit to his hometown of Chicago to go to the polls, leading by example after urging people to register and vote. In jokey mood, he wouldn't confirm who he did actually vote for. But the president has previously endorsed his former Secretary of State and Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton, warning against a Donald Trump presidency.
Saying the goal was to interfere with the U.S. election process for the first time on Friday, the Obama administration squarely blamed Russian President Vladimir Putin's government for a wave of hacking attacks and email leaks. The Department of Homeland Security and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence said in an extraordinary gloves-off statement, the U.S. intelligence community, USIC, is confident based on the scope and sensitivity of these efforts that only Russia's senior-most officials could have authorized these activities.
Hackers have been a major theme in the U.S. presidential election, and mainstream media have turned Russia into a key cyber war adversary. However, just a couple of years ago, Washington's main online threat had a different name, which now seems to have fallen by the wayside.
When in doubt, blame the Russian hackers.
There's no doubt now that Russia has used cyber attacks against all kinds of organizations in our country.
Russian state actors broke into the DNC.
Group with ties to the Russian government.
The intelligence agencies of Russian President Vladimir Putin.
But it wasn't always like that. For years, U.S. officials and mainstream media have been blaming China instead.
A massive Chinese hack of U.S. government computers.
China unleashing its full spy power.
Officials say this could be the biggest cyber attack in American history.
This is an espionage operation run by the Chinese People's Liberation Army.
As outsiders, it's hard to pinpoint who's responsible for certain cyber attacks. But one thing's for sure, the lack of evidence does not stop the media from playing the blame game.
Washington has threatened to impose costs on Russia outside the UN over the Syrian conflict. It may mark the starkest warning so far from America, which has been ramping up anti-Russian rhetoric in recent weeks, moving swiftly from criticism to direct threats. However, just a month ago, US-Russia talks on the Syrian peace process seemed warm and friendly.
Remember when the United States and Russia were keen on sharing their friendship with the world?
Where's the vodka?
Pizza from the American delegation. This is from the Russians.
Well, it's certainly not like that these days.
Extremist groups will continue to exploit the vacuums that are there in Syria to expand their operations, which will include, no question, attacks against Russian interests, perhaps even Russian cities. And Russia will continue to send troops home in body bags.
So how did it get this bad? Well, there are key factors that are being left out as the hateful words and threats get louder. Firstly, the U.S. broke the ceasefire when it killed 60 Syrian army soldiers who were on the front lines battling against ISIL.
Yes, the coalition did hit people on Saturday. We did. A terrible accident.
It's like all the talk of peace has been forgotten.
The next shock group here is the fighting against the regional peer military powers. These are existential for us and our allies. The threat for this type of a fight is a nation state with modern capabilities, aggressive behavior, and engaging in militarized competition. So who would you pick for that one? I think it would be Russia.
According to a survey by Reuters, Russia has built up forces in Syria since a recent ceasefire collapse. The publicly available data suggests that logistic operations have doubled by air and seas compared to 2 weeks ago. The Russian Navy has sent 10 ships through the Bosphorus en route to Syria since hostilities intensified. During the 2 weeks leading up to the negotiated truce, only 5 made the journey. The recent activity also includes a newly delivered S-300 surface-to-air missile system.
The Russian parliament has voted to ratify a treaty allowing Russian troops to stay in Syria indefinitely and making the airbase in Latakia permanent. It also confers diplomatic immunity status on Russian military personnel in the country. The vote passed unopposed as lawmakers agreed it would confer legitimacy on the Russian presence in Syria. Russia is a peace-loving country, and it always underlines that we're doing everything to support peace. If we speak about the operation in Syria, it's a fight against terrorism. This is a fight against evil, and this is a question that's important and which worries Russian citizens and people from other countries as well. Syria already has Russia's only overseas military base, the naval facility at Tartus, and the addition of a permanent airbase strengthens its regional position. Other Russian officials on Friday said that Moscow might be thinking of reopening its former bases in Cuba and Vietnam.
Russian news agencies quoted Russian Deputy Defense Minister Nikolai Pankov as saying on Friday, Russia is considering plans to restore military bases in Vietnam and Cuba that had served as pivots of Soviet global military power during the Cold War. The agencies quoted Pankov as saying in Russia's parliament, "We are dealing with this issue." As part of a drawing down of Russia's military presence around the world after the demise of the Soviet Union, Russia lowered its flag at the Lourdes Signals Intelligence Base in Cuba and the Deepwater Cam Ranh Naval Base in Vietnam in the early 2000s. But since then, Moscow's foreign policy has become more assertive. This has led to tensions with the United States and its allies over, among other issues, the conflicts in Ukraine and Syria and the presence of NATO troops in Eastern Europe.
Finnish border guard services are investigating 2 suspected airspace incursions by Russian fighter bombers. Sukhoi fighters reportedly crossed the Finnish border south of Porvoo. The Finnish defense minister said 2 such incursions in one day was exceptional, especially from fighter jets. The suspected breaches of airspace, it's impossible for me to estimate on the motives. In the media, a temporal link-up's been made with the visit of the United States Deputy Secretary of Defense, Robert Work. All I can say is that there is a temporal linkage, but I have no knowledge of the motives, and this is naturally a matter which the Foreign Ministry will piece together from the Russian side. The Russian Air Force has been probing NATO air defences for months since relations deteriorated over Ukraine and Crimea. And in September, another long-range Tupolev 160 bomber flew down to near Bilbao in Spain, testing the Atlantic's western approaches before flying home. T-160s have also tested Britain's east coast and flown around the top of Scotland in recent months.
President Rodrigo Duterte said that if human rights groups, aid organizations, the EU, and the United States want to withdraw aid in response to his controversial policies, they can go ahead. Duterte has waged a bloody war on drugs, encouraging unrestricted policing and vigilantism against suspected drug pushers and users. In his first 100 days in office, over 300 people have died as a result, many in extrajudicial killings, leading many world leaders and organizations to express alarm. But what will happen if the Philippines really breaks up with the U.S.? Duterte said he doesn't need the U.S. to sell the Philippines weapons because he can get them from China and Russia.
Philippines Defense Minister Delphine Lorenzana says plans for joint patrols and naval exercises with the U.S. in the disputed South China Sea have been put on hold. The move is the first concrete break in the defense cooperation after months of diplomatic tensions between Washington and Manila. Lorenzana said President Rodrigo Duterte also wanted to halt annual joint military exercises with the U.S. The Filipino defense chief added that his country would ask Washington to pull out over 100 American troops involved in operating surveillance drones in the country's south. He said such a move is likely once Manila acquires those intelligence gathering capabilities. He stressed that Filipinos can manage if Washington decides to withdraw aid to the country.
Wind's getting crazy here. This truck's going to be flooded.
So many places already flooded, and we're concerned about people getting trapped in that floodwater. 5 deaths now attributed to this storm, and 2 of those, sadly, from people that unfortunately died from carbon monoxide poisoning after they were trying to run a generator in their garage. So, again, you want to run those with complete ventilation and open air. Take a look at the roadways. There's debris everywhere. There's so many power outages. More than 1 million people in Florida with power outages, and the workers are doing what they can to get that power back on. But actually, just outside of Jacksonville, there was a utility worker that was electrocuted as he was trying to work on the power lines. So these men and women are literally risking their lives to try to get your power back on. So please keep them in mind as they are out and about. Into places like Jacksonville Beach, just unbelievable, where we saw the beach suffer significant damage. The tide gauge there, according to the National Weather Service, 4.73 feet, the highest it's been since 1898. We talked about St. Augustine getting hit very hard. There were actually 20 people that got stranded at a bed and breakfast because they refused to leave, so that included 6 children. So when you're told to evacuate, this is why. In Volusia County, there were 2 hospitals that were actually evacuated because they were fearful of what might be coming, and clearly they were in the right mind to do so. Places like Port St. Lucie, you're being told don't take your plywood off quite yet. We still got a ways to go with Hurricane Matthew.